Do you know how once you become aware of something, you notice it everywhere? I got a plug-in hybrid Prius about a year ago. Okay, yes, I'm one of those Prius drivers. Well, before the dealer showed it to me, I wasn't even aware that there was such a thing. But now I see cars just like mine all the time. You may have noticed that the pandemic has put a spotlight on things that you weren't as aware of before, and it's challenging old parenting styles. Today, we're going to explore current challenges and new ways of communicating with our kids. This is LD Expert Live. My parents never had parenting issues around technology other than TV. Today is a totally different ballgame. My guest, Dr. Regine Muradian, is going to talk about important issues facing parents today, including how to create boundaries around video games and technology, better ways of communicating with today's children and teens, what students with learning and attention challenges need, and how to take advantage of the pandemic to make needed changes. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers and author of At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. To get a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. I want to give a shout out to all our faithful viewers and to all of our subscribers who tune in on the replay. If you're new to the broadcast, welcome. Let's say hello to Lauren, our moderator and Stowell Learning Center's Director of Clinical Growth and Operations. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. I'll be taking questions and comments for Jill and today's guests. Let us know that you're here and that you're checking in, and let us know where you're checking in from. We love to see our viewers from all over the country and where you're viewing from. So say hello in the chat. If you have questions for Jill or Dr. Muradian, please put them in the chat and I'll get to your questions. This is a really hot topic, I know. Oh, we already have somebody good. You're fast. Holly is checking in from Ventura City. So hopefully she's connected to our Thousand Oaks Center. Hi, Holly. We are doing a poll. So if you have been on our social media page, we have the Best of 2020 poll where you can vote for your favorite LD Expert Live episode of 2020. We have 6 finalists. And the competition is fierce. So get your vote in. You can vote more than once. So there's a little bit of a voting war going on. And we will have a best of episode airing on January 5th, where we will announce our fan favorites, our top 3 fan favorite episodes from 2020. So make sure you vote. That's on our social media pages, or if you're connected to us on our email list, you got an email about that. So go ahead and vote. And don't forget about Mom Squad. So Mom Squad is our community on Facebook, private Facebook group where we support each other. It's for parents of kids and teens with learning and attention challenges. You can ask questions. You can ask questions anonymously and get feedback from the group. I repost resources from some of our past guests, different events that they're hosting, resources that they provide. That's all in Mom Squad, and you're welcome to join. And I am happy to announce that in January, we'll be resuming our PEACE meetings. So PEACE is our parent support group. It stands for Parent Enrichment and Continued Education. It is a support group for parents of kids and teens with learning and attention challenges. We go through Jill's book, At Wit's End. We discuss the chapters. We talk about how it affects you. It's really a place for you to be part of the conversation. We run it a little bit different than LD Expert Live. We're going to do it through Zoom so you can actually participate, ask questions in real time. And I'll be hosting that in January. So look out for posts about that. Okay. And
so
today,
what's happening?
I know we do. I mean, but it is. And especially today, there's a lot of buzz around today's show because of the technology issue. Parents everywhere are kind of pulling their hair out. We had a question from a parent in Mom Squad last week, just asking how much screen time is too much. Should I let him play video games? He that's his downtime. He's saying that's the only way he can interact with his friends right now. But kids are doing school online, and so that is a lot of screen time. I will tell you that personally, as a mother myself with a new baby and a 5-year-old, sometimes that's the only time I can get Cammie to sit still is to put her in front of a screen. So I struggle with it myself. So really excited about today's topic and looking forward to the advice that Dr. Muradian has to share. So keep checking in, say hi, tell us where you're from. We'll check back in a little bit.
Thank you, Lauren. If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell. We're talking today about parenting in the 21st century. I am delighted to welcome our guest, Dr. Regine Muradian, back to our show. Dr. Muradian is a licensed clinical psychologist, author, speaker, consultant, and mental health advocate. In her clinical practice, Dr. Muradian works with children, adolescents, adults, and families who present with a wide range of emotional, behavioral, and adjustment problems, such as depression, anxiety, relationship issues, executive functioning, and ADHD. She is also the mom of 3 children who really understands the daily challenges of being a parent and the stressors associated with juggling a career and family life. Welcome back, Dr. Muradian.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me again.
It is just great to have you back, and especially with this topic. Of course, I basically just told our viewers that you would solve all their 21st century parenting challenges. So are you ready for that?
Oh gosh, that's a tall order. We will definitely try.
Well, I want to start with an issue that was a concern before the pandemic and has become an even bigger issue now, video games. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what video games do in the brain and how that impacts our kids.
Yes. So I wanted to touch upon maybe just like some research that was recently done. It was like by Mark Paulus. And what they had found is that the video games really impacted the structure of the brain and the activity of the brain. And they did find actually structural changes in the brain and in the functionality. So I think that was really interesting as I was also looking into what are some new advances and research out there, as this has been such a common topic for years, but even more so now. So one of the things that I'm just noticing just in general in my practice and as a parent, and also what other parents are reporting are impacts on attention, irritability. Kids are becoming more aggressive once they come off the game. So really, noticing that there's such a huge increase just in the aggressive behavior, which makes a lot of sense as, one of the most common played games are usually, there's Fortnite and there's so many other ones that they're playing that can have some violence in it. And you will see them kind of tapping at the screen. And, there's so much aggressive play in terms of competing and winning. And so I think that also plays a role into how they feel once they're detached and they come off the game, and how they function during the day after that.
Mm-hmm. And I've read that can even be kind of like similar to soldiers, that aggression and irritability.
Yeah, so it reminds me a little bit of some desensitization that tends to happen where, if you're playing hours on end, the same type of repetitive, aggressive type behavior, whether it's shooting, whether it's, more obviously the more aggressive games versus the calmer games, we are noticing definitely an increase in aggression, a desensitization to the impulse, right? That is all managed through the frontal lobe. And they just don't have that impulse control as regulated. That's what I'm noticing.
Mm-hmm. Many parents call you and they call us at Stowell Learning Centers about their child or teen's poor executive function. Executive function is developmental, and it's a process that develops well into the 20s. So, obviously video games can't get all the blame, but executive functions are frontal lobe functions. And if the frontal lobe, as you said, is getting turned off or desensitized, then we are going to see a lack of tact or poor self-management and impulse control.
Yes, yes, that's a very good point. And also, what I'm also noticing is the patience level. They don't have as much patience as they used to. But again, I think the good news is, and I'm sure we'll go over that, is how much do we regulate that piece? So it doesn't stay forever. We don't want to frighten anyone. But just for parents and caregivers and teachers, and just creating this conversation about what's healthy and how to moderate and regulate it. But in terms of the executive functioning, when it comes to doing work or homework, yes, the attention span is much shorter. They're more frustrated. So imagine if they have to attend now to Zoom. And that's another thing is during this pandemic, we are on Zoom. So we're seeing screen fatigue, Zoom fatigue. I had a friend who works in the medical field had mentioned, she works with children, that she had noticed vision issues where they were losing colors in the eyes. And
wow.
And even seizures we've heard of in certain children. Also, I don't know if you ever noticed on video games, it will state a disclaimer in terms of be cautious, this video game may cause seizures. So in some children, if they are predisposed, that could occur. So it's just something to be mindful of as, we impose rules and boundaries around what that looks like. And obviously it is a personal decision for parents on how they deal with that.
And, obviously devices are a part of our world now, and especially now because so many kids are doing school online. And so if we just recognize it really does impact our brain. And so we just want to have a little balance there, take some time to step outside and look bigger than just, focusing in on the screen. But also being aware and educating our kids about, the amount of time, we're not regulating the amount of time they spend on their video games just because we're mean old parents, but because it really, their brain needs a little bit of balance. So, it is interesting. When I started the Learning Center, children were spending much more time outside, moving their bodies and engaging their imaginations, and they were generally more regulated. The big questions then were how much TV time is okay, and is Sesame Street really good for kids? Well, since that time, we've seen a real change in the concerns that parents have around their students' learning challenges. We're seeing much more concern about poor regulation, attention challenges, and anxiety. And, I'm sure there is some correlation with the amount of time spent on screens and video games. And I think you were mentioning that you even had kind of checked in with friends and neighbors and patients to find out their experience.
Yes, I was asking actually just some questions. How are you guys doing? How are you feeling? What are your rules around the video games? Are you noticing an increase in aggression or irritability? And how have you been handling it? And it's so interesting as I look through all the responses, everyone felt the same thing. And the results were, yes, more aggression, more irritability, just really having a hard time getting the kids off the video games, even though they did put some restrictions. And it, at the end of the day, just became this battle. And we don't want the battle, right? We want them to, we want to come together to a consensus. And that goes into the communication piece and giving kids control. At the end of the day, it's them making that decision. And like you said, I love what you said, is them coming up and understanding, well, I know you don't like the boundaries and the rules, and that's a fact. Every time we do put a boundary, a rule, or a structure, I say this to my kids all the time. I know you're angry and you're upset or you don't like what I just said, but that's just mommy putting a boundary or a structure or, saying something that you don't agree with. And that's okay. And you can tell me why you don't agree with it. And then we kind of create that conversation, but we're able to move forward. And I think that's what's really important is that parents, be consistent and stick with what they feel, based on the decision that they made.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, how do parents create boundaries around games and screen time? I mean, we obviously can't avoid it in our world, and really we don't want to. I mean, there's a lot of information that we get. There are social connections which our kids really need. We all need. So what advice do you have for parents as they try to create boundaries?
Yes. So I think the first part is you have the video game piece, and then we have kids on social media. And so those two different parts. So let's start first with the video games. I think, like you mentioned, kids before the pandemic were outside, they were playing, they were more regulated. They didn't really have time to play. A lot of parents that I know, there were just no video games Monday through Friday. They were just too busy, whether it was with homework or activities. Now, during the pandemic, we have removed, right, all social interaction. So they're not in school, they're not seeing their friends. They're not getting together as they used to. There's no activities. So that's an important part to keep in mind. And so what we're left with are kids who, what I've been seeing just as of late is withdrawn, maybe anxious, depression, etc. So now we tackle the issue of video games. And parents have kind of changed the rules and bent the rules. And that's all fine. And I think there's a positive part of it, which I think, well, when we think about their mental health is number one. And part of the mental health is them connecting with their peers and enjoying with them. And then when you see them playing, they're actually, yes, there's a negative sides of it, but they're actually interacting, they're talking, they're conversing. And I think that's really healthy. So it's kind of like choosing what are the options that we have now. So now we're left with the timing, right? So we know that there's all these benefits. However, there's all the negatives, which are the timing. How many hours are you on video games?
Right.
And when you look at the timing from what I've asked, I'm talking about 5 hours, 6 hours. I mean, I remember last summer clients playing pre-pandemic, sorry, the summer before. I had one kid saying he would lock himself in the room from 9 a.m. all the way to 5 p.m. It's a long time. Draw the curtains and just sit there and play. So that to me, well, obviously we know those are concerns. So what do? I think it's important, and it's not too late, even if you have imposed, even if you have some rules and boundaries right now, it's not too late to still have this conversation, even if your child is playing 5 to 6 hours, because there is that struggle. 100%, they are going to be upset. They will be irritable and they will throw a tantrum. They're not going to be happy with any changes happening around their time.
Right.
What I have found useful, and I really, and then Jill and I, we were talking about this, is I sat down, for example, my son, I sat down with him and we really talked just in form of a question. How many hours are you playing online? Now, you got to keep in mind that kids don't have time concept. So he'll joke and say, oh, I was playing 10 hours. Well, he was never playing 10 hours, but in his mind, that's how much time he thought he was playing. So that tells me that that's a long time, even if it was 3 hours. So we came up with a solution where he ended up deciding his time frame. So we kind of came down to 2 hours and chunking out the 2 hours, 1 hour at a time, and deciding what time that would be during the day for him. I used to have even restrictions. There are restrictions that parents can place in terms of when the video games go off, and it's just manual. like programs like, it's a wireless program we have at home, for example, it's called Eero, and you just turn it off from your phone. However, they get not just him, I had asked multiple people about this. Kids get really frustrated when the game just turns off and the parent just turned it off, and then they're in the middle of something, or they were in the middle of talking to someone. So that creates a lot of anxiety. So how do we appease that is, even like before, is giving them a time frame. Hey, you're 10 minutes, you have 10 more minutes on there. I expect you to get off. How does that sound to you? And then most likely what I've noticed even with this technique, it's been working really well because kids at the end of the day want to please you. They want to be compliant. And I think that when we go into the explanation and the why, there's more of an understanding. Now, I'm not saying all kids are going to be okay with that, but at least it is a strategy that a parent can try.
I remember when you and I were talking about this, and you kind of alluded to this. You really talked to your son about your opinion about how things needed to be, and that's where we can do some of that education, about, as a parent, I have to help you grow and protect your brain. And so too much on, too much time on video games is going to hurt your brain. So I can't let that happen. But I know it's important to you, and you gave him the opportunity to share why it was important to him and validated that, and I think that is the first place we have to start with problem solving like this. If our kids just feel like we're going to be the power, we're going to hide the devices, or we're going to shut off video games, you're going to get all kinds of rebellion. But if we sit down and we start to problem solve it together and validate each side, and talk about the why, I really find at the Learning Center, no matter what we're doing with kids, if we talk about why, and I love to talk to kids about what's happening in their brain, but we talk about why we're doing this, they're much more willing to do just about anything, even if it's something that's kind of challenging. So I think that kind of dialogue gives them some power. And then in terms of shutting off, it's true. I don't play video games. And so, it would be like, okay, time to shut it off. Bam. But they're probably right in the middle of a very important move or something. So, giving a little, okay, 10 minutes, wrap it up is, a positive thing.
Yes, I even remember pre-pandemic, a lot of clients saying things when I would ask something like, what would you like your parent to do differently? Teens would say, well, I would like my parent not to just shut off my computer, or I would like, what would you like them to do? I would like them to give me a 10-minute alert or signal so that, and again, if you look at what that really means, it's just them having the control to turn it
Right.
off. So I found that really helpful, even with my kids, is when we decide on time frames. Well, what is your plan tonight? What is your plan in terms of what time are you going to go to bed? What is your plan? Obviously, as a parent, you have already created that structure. So if your time is 10, it's 10. If it's 9, it's 9. But it's just about gently nudging them and starting again the conversation about, okay, well, it's about 8 o'clock. If you want to be in bed by 10, what do you think you need to do? So there's a lot of questioning. And I think that when kids, like you said, when they start speaking and sharing their opinion, they feel in control and they're more likely to do it. It reminds me of like a math problem. Well, you tell me now how to do this. Can you teach me? Because I'm not sure how to do that problem. And it kind of has the same analogy, and it works because at the end of the day, kids want to please, they want to feel empowered. They want to be able to make their own decisions. And above all, they want independence. And independence is part of teaching them how to make decisions and regulate their emotions. And for parents, I always say, don't get worried of that tantrum. That's okay. They'll forget it. I think it's all about not reacting to their tantrum and just recognizing, I can see you're upset right now. I could see that what I said made you frustrated. I'm going to let you, take a few moments, and then I'll come back and check with you. And I think, you're leaving, but you're not giving them a sense of abandonment. But you're also telling them, I'm not going to give you negative attention and feed into the tantrum right now, or whatever they're going through that makes them dysregulated in that moment.
Right. And once they're in that state, they're not in their rational brain anyway, so nothing is going to get solved until they settle down. You said something that I just think is so important, and it's just such a slight shift in how we do things. We're used to telling our kids what they need to do, or it's time to do this, or go do this, and revisiting it by asking the question, oh, well, if you're going to be in bed by 10, what are your plans between now and then? Or what you're doing is you're allowing them actually to start to use their own executive function. You're giving them exercise in building their own executive function to start to think through, oh, wait, my bedtime's at 10. I want to do these things first. That's what we do in our adult brains, and that's developing in kids. And so giving them a little bit of freedom there to do that is really a great thing. I will say, oh, go ahead, Regine.
I was going to mention, as you're talking, it reminds me a lot. We talk about executive functioning, is what we see a lot too, especially now on Zoom, is, well, why aren't you doing so well in that class? What's happening? What do you think is happening? And they'll tell you. And a lot of the times they'll say, missing assignments, I'm not turning things in, I'm forgetting, or I didn't do it, or it was too much. And I think just this exercise, like you were describing, is so helpful because it really helps them plan out. And that's what executive functioning is. You being able to organize yourself and plan out your day and what you're going to do, so we don't, experience the big word, right? I call it procrastination.
Right.
And, just enjoying yourself more, having more time for you, and just getting the other things out of the way. Because then it's just anxiety all day long that they feel of what I need to get done. So, and that's another power of the questioning that really helps in helping them decide and make those decisions. But I want to tell parents that it's not that we're letting them do whatever they want. This is not what this is about. This is about, you have already created the rules in terms of, well, we already agreed on 10 o'clock, or we already agreed on 2 hours of video games. We already talked about that. We agreed on that. So now it's up to them to kind of divide it up during the day, and we just have that back and forth conversation. So I don't want anyone to be under the impression it's, my kid can play 5 hours, I should let him play 5 hours. So I always go with a 2 hour, 2 to 3 hour, even 3 is pushing it, limit. And think about some other ways that you can keep your child busy. I've seen a lot of parents do baking, taking them outside, or just distracting them, or, we're going to go do this right now. So that's one way I get my son off. Like, we're going to go do this right now. Are you ready? I'm waiting for you. And he's like, okay, I got to go. So any way we can distract once that time limit is up.
This kind of collaborative, questioning, kind of problem solving that we're talking about, communication that we're talking about with our kids, it feels like, well, that's really going to take a lot of time. And it does take time. And when you're exhausted, it's so hard to take the time and have the patience and use that calm, nonchalant voice, but it's so worth it in the long run. It can just create a whole different feel in the household. And going back to the brain, I mean, it just has a very positive impact on the brain too.
Yeah.
I'm Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers, and my guest today is Dr. Regine Muradian. Let's take a moment to check in with Lauren and our viewers.
Hello. Great topic, and it's very timely. When you were talking about engaging the child or the teen in problem solving, it really reminded me. I mean, we have this issue a lot with executive function and teens, and a lot of times kids come to us and they're kind of shut down. They're kind of resistant to change. And so we had a young man, not this past summer, but the summer before, and he was brilliant, but he was failing everything. And, parents identified that he needed to work on some executive function skills, and he did. I mean, he didn't turn in assignments, but he was so resistant to any kind of change because he felt like, well, he was brilliant. And I'm so smart, there shouldn't be anything wrong with me. So working with him, if we would suggest like, hey, let's get a planner, or hey, let's plan out your day, he would push back and became really resistant. And so instead, we took that approach to kind of involve him in solving the problem. And we used a program of ours called AMPS that has kind of a metacognition element, and started to train him to think about his own thinking. But instead of it, the problem being, something he was doing wrong in his life, we made it about the activity we were doing in the program, so that the activity was the problem we were trying to solve and not him. And slowly he became less and less resistant because he was part of that like problem solving collaboration. And slowly we were able to then, generalize that to his life. And so that's just, as you were talking about that, I'm like, yes, we do need to involve our kids in problem solving, so that, because at first we're taking something away from them, or a lot of times they think you're saying something's wrong with me. And really approaching it from a different standpoint of like, no, the behavior is the problem, or, this component is the problem. How can we solve it together? Has been really effective in executive function training. So really appreciate that. Keep posting questions and comments. Let us know who's here and where you're checking in from. I do have a question from that was PM to me in Mom Squad. This is a big one. So this parent is asking, how can you tell when a video game is an addiction, or when your child has an addiction? This mom suspects that her son, he's acting like it's an addiction. They've caught him getting up in the middle of the night and playing in the middle of the night. They've tried turning off the internet and having to do that, cutting him off and turning off the internet, at 10 o'clock when everybody goes to bed. And he tried to apparently tap into the neighbor's Wi-Fi in order to get online and play. Just kind of doing these behaviors that, trying to get online and trying to continue with his video games. And so this mom is just asking for some feedback and advice. How do you know when it's at that addiction level, and is the solution just to cut him off cold turkey? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so when we talk about video game addiction, it's very similar to substance abuse addiction. So you have this craving of wanting it more and more. So most likely, it's possible if he's getting up in the middle of the night, that means he's craving more of it. And he is probably experiencing symptoms of addiction, which is, I need more and more of it. I can't stay off of it. So yes, kids are very savvy. They will figure out, you turn off the Wi-Fi, if they have LTE or, other access, they will get it. I'm not a fan of cold turkey. So this is again of what we talked about before. It's kind of like removing someone off of anything. Cold turkey can be an issue. So what we want to do is, what I would recommend is, well, first of all, having that conversation in terms of, this is how it's impacting your brain, right? And we're here to protect you and to take care of you. And this is our job as parents. That's number one, having that conversation on what the plan is. And I think this is where parents just have to create that plan, because I don't think, if he's addicted, most likely he'll have a hard time detaching and won't allow the parent to take it away. So I think that also, when we say cold turkey, what do? We just take the laptop away or whatever the device is, or we can create a conversation around, saying something to this nature of, well, I have noticed, you were going on it in the middle of the night. So, I think what we're going to do, because this is not safe for you, is we're going to maybe take the laptop away or the devices at night, because I know looks like it's really hard for you. I can understand. So we're not upset about that. I think it's important to go into the emotions that the parents are feeling, because kids automatically operate on fear, and they're just thinking, oh, are you upset at me? Oh, are you mad at me? And they make all these assumptions based on every time a parent puts a boundary, a rule, or a structure, automatically the parent is strict. The parent is the meanest parent, and that's okay. I said, well, thank you, lady. Later, when they're in their 20s, they'll realize. I have this happen all the time. They're like, oh, I understand why mom and dad did that. But it's all about how do we function until we get there. So I think starting a conversation and talking about it. And I think this is what we're going to do. And they probably have to remove the device out of the room. I think that is the safest. I mean, kids need at least 9 to 10 hours of sleep at night. I don't know this child's age. So that can impact. Now we're talking about impacting sleep, affecting your health. So we can't allow that to continue. And that's where parents need to make that decision on what they're going to do in terms of possibly removing it from the room, because this is a problem, but also talking to him about what this feels like. Identify the behavior, not saying something's wrong with you. Never. It's more about identifying the behavior that is an issue, like the assignments. The behavior is not that you are not good enough. The behavior is you didn't turn in your assignments. Can you tell me what happened there? Are you needing any help? What happened? Often kids will say, I forgot. It was too much for me. I couldn't handle it, or I didn't understand. So again, like, oh, okay, I can understand that. All right, how can I help you? Now you're allowing me to get involved. Okay, no, I don't need your help. Well, if the child with the addiction says, I don't need your help, well, this is where we have to, sometimes parents just have to step in a little bit, more strict and more structured, and just say, well, I do think it's an issue, and this is what we're going to do. How does that make you feel? We can still talk about the feelings piece, and most likely they're not going to be happy, but it is for their benefit. So it's not always about making kids happy, but also keeping them safe, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's your job as a parent, isn't it?
Right.
That balance.
Yes. I mean, we're going to have the struggle. I think I think we shouldn't be afraid as parents to deal with the struggle, like in terms of having the struggle around us. Yes, the struggle is painful. The tantrums are painful. The fighting is painful. But sometimes, and if that's, again, it's like Jill was saying, is maintaining your calm is hard sometimes when you've had a hard day at work and you have chores and you have other kids to take care of and you are busy doing other things. But just being mindful that if I can't do it at this moment, we'll talk about it in 5 minutes, for example, or in 10 minutes, or give me this time to enter, to come in, to do what I need to do, and then we'll talk about it.
That's great advice.
So thinking about that issue of video game addiction, because that has come up some, and I'm sure it's becoming a bigger issue now with kids not having as much to do. I wonder if it would make sense, if you look at the total amount they're playing and together look at that and then try to whittle that away a little bit. So say this week, we're going to cut that down by a half an hour. If they're playing 5 hours, and you're cutting it by a half an hour, they're still playing a lot. But maybe then coming up with a replacement behavior. So instead of playing video games during that half hour, let's play a board game together, or let's walk around the block, or let's bake cookies, or something. If we could replace it, do something to replace that during the week. Exercise would be a great one, especially if they're sitting in front of a screen like that. And then each week, maybe bring it down 30 minutes or whatever to gradually wean them off. I don't know. Do you have a thought about that?
Yes, I love that. It reminds me of what we talked about in our earlier LD Expert Live back in the summer, was how do we wean kids back into school in terms of sleep? And it was this thing. And yes, we can't do the just remove everything. It is about doing the increments is really important. I think that's a great idea. And also the replacement is like redirecting. It's redirecting behavior. And I think that's going to work because at the end of the day, kids do want to spend more time with parents. Even though we're all in the home together, are we really spending quality time together? Everyone is off doing their own thing. So there could be more isolation, more withdrawn. They're more withdrawn. So what is it? And I even think a great idea would be for parents to maybe just create a list that they could just keep visible somewhere where they're writing down on replacements. And that could be baking cookies. That's one of, taking a walk, going to the park, whatever it is, that could be a replacement. And I'm just envisioning doing this with your kid and the kid can choose, well, what do you want to choose for today? Because remember, we did come off the computer 30 minutes earlier. That was our plan. So go ahead and choose that. But I think you have to have that conversation right before so they know when we do the redirection exercise, they can go directly to that list, choose because they created it, right? And so it's theirs.
And it gives them some feeling of control. Yes, they had to get off their device, but they get to choose. So, yeah.
Great advice. Thank you. We have Sharon checking in from Placentia, California. Hello and welcome. And we have another Sharon that's asking about, she says, our school district is now using core competencies model in their schools. They've also included this in their IEPs instead of direct executive function skills training. And she's just asking, will this address the needs for kids with executive function weaknesses? So I think core competencies, I haven't heard that term, but then I've been out of the classroom since 2010. But it sounds like a basic skills type of model where we're teaching kids, to follow a schedule or, be on top of homework. I have seen that in our local school districts. It's called basic skills or core skills. And it's teaching them just the routine of being a good student, following a schedule and turning in assignments and things like that. Does anyone else have any? I have seen it be effective with kids because it does give them a lot of structure. Just in working, at the Learning Center, kids that are in some of these classes where it is incorporated into their IEP, it gives them something to, using their model at school. And, if you're using, turning things in online, things like that. So it's using the exact model that the school is using and teaching a student how to function effectively in that model. So I have seen that be very effective. It doesn't always teach, maybe the underlying skills that are impacting executive function, but it helps them at least be able to keep their head above water at school with all of the different teachers and assignments.
Yeah.
Right.
I will share this with everyone. I don't know if you can see.
Oh,
do you see this? So
yes.
This is, I'm sure you can get these on Amazon in different forms. So, I'm pretty old fashioned this way. I really love for executive functioning. I just love the writing component. So just to answer, as you were talking about core competencies and what that looks like, and how other parents can use this. So this has been awesome in our home too. So every morning when you wake up, when school starts, this is a really good task to do, because let's say on Monday you can write down everything that's already posted online that you need to do that day. I think that what's happening is when kids are seeing, and not to veer off topic off of video games, but I think this is important with the executive functioning because I think it ties in so much in that muscle that needs to be massaged and exercised that they are losing right now, just not being in school, period. I think we all know that. And also with the video game impact, there is a decrease in executive functioning and patience, etc. So what I would recommend is they can kind of like jot down, okay, what do you have planned for Monday? What are you going to do on Monday? And then I think the power, again, of crossing out
Mhm.
what you already completed is so great because they feel like they've accomplished something. And then it's really great for the parent to kind of also check in, oh, did you turn in everything? This is also something I'm sure same style they're using in the schools in terms of teaching them how to uh, create their schedule, be organized, and not get overwhelmed. I think they're just getting very overwhelmed with so
Mhm.
much. And part of the video gaming, I think, decreases that muscle ability, where let's say before, imagine they had more muscle ability to handle more, let's say
Mhm.
pre-pandemic. And now it's much less because everything is instant gratification. I want it now. Think about when they're
Mhm.
playing that game, it's immediate almost.
Mhm.
Um, I'm also seeing that when we go back to the anger and them getting upset when they're losing. So imagine sitting there taking a test or listening onto a Zoom session. Do they have that patience now? Much less. So I like that they're using that, and I think it should be a class. I think executive functioning skills, study skills should be a class for kids because this is something you're either born with it, or of course it can be taught. Some kids are just
Mhm.
naturally type A. They're excellent at organizing themselves, and that's what I'm noticing also with Zoom is kids on Zoom who are succeeding really well are the type A personalities who can handle a lot of information and just multitask. So that's why we are seeing a
Mhm.
lot of kids who are not, with just different personalities and styles, are having
Mhm.
a little harder time.
Yeah, and definitely our kids that already have learning and attention challenges, even more so. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Keep checking in. Let us know who's here. We'll check in one more time before the end of the show. So if you do have a question or a comment, be sure to post it, and I'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell here with clinical psychologist Dr. Regine Muradian, talking about key parenting issues for today. So, we've been talking about some different ways to communicate with our kids. What thoughts do you have about communicating with our students who are struggling with learning or attention about what they need and what they don't?
I think we go back to again creating right a form of structure for our kids, and like going back to this that little form that I showed.
Uh-huh.
And you can find that anywhere. They have it on Amazon, just different forms. It doesn't have to be exactly the same one, but just in terms of a schedule, a paper schedule. I think that the kids who are now struggling with learning and attention, I think it's really about doing these little check-ins throughout the day. It's kind of like, and I'm sure I'm curious also to see how you're doing it at your center, because it is the same method where we're checking in. How are you doing? Maybe it's per the hour, but also at the same time giving them somewhat of that independence. I always say let's allow them to succeed instead of us parents being constantly on them, and let's give them a little bit of that independence, because I feel like when they feel that they have the independence, they detach from the diagnosis, so to speak. I
Mhm.
think there's so much mental health stigma that kids feel. Oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I have ADHD. I don't like this. I want to get rid of this. I want to be normal. This is all I hear. And, when you give them that independence and try it out for a week, and independence can look like, well, let's do this schedule. I'll give it to you, and maybe I'll check in with you only one time at the end of the day at 5 o'clock and see if everything, you tell me what did you struggle with, and we can look together at what was turned in. I just told this to a client yesterday. I said, this is not that you can't be trusted that you didn't turn it in. I am sure you turned it in, but sometimes when there's too much to do, we often miss things. It happens. We're human. And I think when we normalize that, as we adults can make errors and mistakes, it's natural. It normalizes it for them. because remember, kids feel everything in terms of, in that moment, it just stays like an imprint, like a trauma. This is never going to end. Whereas we as adults can kind of detach from that and say, okay, I'll just do better next time. But in kids' minds, it feels so intense, right? That failure or that assignment they didn't turn in, or they got scolded by the teacher, or something had occurred that day. And I think now also with grades being so visible in some classes, that causes also more stress on kids. So I'm a really big advocate on, let's detach from the label piece, and because you are not your anxiety, you are not your learning disability, you are not your ADHD. You are you, and what makes you unique and good and special in terms of your talent and what you can provide. So I think when we reframe it that way, they feel better, they feel stronger, and sometimes you can even give the learning disability a nickname. Oh, there it is, it's popping up again, or and just having fun with it. And I always attribute it, it's a weakness that you have. This is your weakness. I have my weaknesses too. And I think when the parent steps back and takes on that stance, or even ask the kid, what do you think mommy's weakness is? Or what do you think I struggle with? Because we all struggle with something. So that's the normalization part that I think we need to do more of now more than ever, and take this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And just, dialoguing with them a little bit about what they feel like they need from us. Kids are amazing, and I think we do tend to underestimate them. As parents, we just want so badly to protect them and help them, and we feel like we're not doing our job if we can't do it. But sometimes in our effort to keep them from failing, or to make sure that they're not struggling, we keep them from gaining resilience and independence. And that's not to say with our kids who are really struggling that we don't give them any help, but really dialoguing together about what pieces of it they really can do, and allowing them to do that, and setting, as you said, a check-in time where we can come back and check, but allowing them to work on it themselves and getting their feedback about what pieces they would like support in, and what they feel like, yep, I got this. Because they feel so much better about themselves when they do know they've got it. They can do some of it themselves.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good. I was going to mention, as you were talking about that, is the discussion pieces. When you step back, and most kids will say, I just want you to listen. I don't need your feedback. I don't want to lecture. I just want to hear. I just want to talk. And some kids will express that and some won't. So I think it's just automatically to assume that that's what kids need, and just starting with that active listening piece could be helpful too.
Back in September, on September 22nd, our guest on LD Expert was Makayla Caliendo. She is a delightful 16-year-old with ADD. And really, if you haven't watched the episode, you should. She gave really good advice for students, parents, and teachers from the perspective of someone living with ADD. And she and her mom obviously had a really good relationship, but she said, I hate it when my mom says, do your chores. She says, I already knew I had to do my chores. So now that you told me, it makes me angry and I don't want to do them anymore. And she said, ask me something like, how are your chores going? Or how would you like me to remind you what the steps were? We want to empower our kids. And sometimes it's just that really slight shift in our language that will do that.
Yes, it is so powerful, Jill. It is such a powerful statement. when you put it back on them, and you will miraculously see that room cleaned. You will miraculously see things picked up. I mean, just by shifting that one statement, right? Or how's it going? Do you need any help on this? Or, what is your plan today? And
Right.
versus telling them. I think when you tell them, there's this innate feel of, I'm just not going to do it. Don't feel like doing it just because you told me. And I also, adults feel that too with their adult parents, right? I'm like, oh, I'm not a kid anymore. You don't have to tell me to do X, Y, or Z. So we have to assume that also kids feel that same way because they've expressed it, definitely.
Right. I'm Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers, and this is LD Expert Live. Let's check in with Lauren and our viewers one more time before we wrap up today. And then, believe it or not, we're going to wrap up with some positives about the pandemic.
Hello. Hi, we have another question coming in from Mom Spot anonymously. This is kind of a little different, but it does relate to online and virtual learning. This parent is asking, have you seen kids with increased anxiety being on camera on Zoom, so online classes? She describes her 11-year-old daughter kind of having anxious behaviors, doing a lot of she'll like perseverate on being on camera. Like she has days where they have to be in class and the teacher is requiring the students to turn on their camera in order to take attendance. And then there's non-attendance days where they're supposed to be doing their work. And so on those days when her daughter needs to be on camera the night before, she perseverates on that and thinking about, I have to turn on my camera and what am I going to wear? And is kind of tearing their family apart because no one's allowed in the room when she's doing online classes. And so mom is just asking, is that anxiety? And should I be worried about that with her?
Yes, I'm actually seeing this a lot, believe it or not. And it makes a lot of sense. Think about it as just us now on camera or when we're on Zoom, we are looking at ourselves. And for teenagers or tweens, I call them the tweens, 11 going on to 15. I always joke about that. There is this feeling of, oh my gosh, how do I look? Do I have a pimple?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, is Johnny over there, Katie over there staring at me? Or did I make a funny face? So there's a lot more focus on the body image aspect and how I look, more so than when you're in class. Think about it. When you're in class, you don't really see yourself in physical class, when we were in school. So one option, and I don't know if this is possible, is to actually, you can have your camera on Zoom, if that's what they're using, or Google Meet, but not see yourself. I think there is an option to do that where it's not focused on you. I believe so, and that could help. So that's one. Is it a sign of anxiety? Absolutely. It does sound like some anxious symptoms there, especially as she's ruminating it the night before, thinking about it, feeling anxious during that time. So the other option would also be to come up with a plan with the teacher. I think this is where the parent needs to probably step in, email or create a conversation with the teacher and explain that in private of, this is what's going on with my child. This is very natural. I do understand. And again, my child's mental health is priority, and I don't want her stressing about this. I always put it back on the teacher. Do you have any suggestions before the parent makes a suggestion? And allow the teacher to come up with a suggestion. I am sure they're not the first. I'm sure the teacher has heard about this problem. This is what I hear all the time. Even my clients on Zoom, I do give them that option. I say, it's okay if you don't want to show your full face. I'm fine with that. You could show your forehead. So, because I know how uncomfortable they can feel just being on screen like this. This is hard. So, that's the first thing I would do, is probably connect with teacher, validate her feelings. I think parent needs to validate how she's feeling. Say, oh gosh, I can understand what that feels like. Tell me more. What is really bothering you when that happens? Just so that the child gets a way of expressing and letting these emotions out. And then after that, well, what do you think? Let's talk to the teacher. Let's try to find a solution on this, because I can understand how you're feeling. Now you're creating a bond with your child. You're communicating positively. You're validating their feelings. And we're coming up with a solution, which is the most important. And that will be a gateway for other problems in the future and how to resolve them.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice. Again, connecting and really validating that this is something real that the child's feeling. So thank you for that. I'm sure this is not the only mom. I've definitely heard about this in our centers from our students, that we just added a whole new element to that imaginary audience part of teenage development, that, yeah, everybody is watching you and now it's on camera. So that is really hard. Thank you to everyone who's participated and who commented. Again, if you have additional questions after the show, feel free to post them in Mom Squad. As you can see, we do take a lot of anonymous questions. It's just a place if you're trying to go through something as a parent and trying to figure out your kid, we have a great resource there of other parents who get it and professionals that can give you great advice. Don't forget about Peace coming in January. We are running that through Mom Squad. That is our support group. That is also an opportunity to ask questions and get some support. Being a parent is hard enough. Being a parent during a pandemic is, something none of us planned for. So a great community to get some support and ask questions about your child at those Peace meetings. And don't forget about our poll. We're voting for our best of show in 2020. Find it on our social media pages, on Facebook, on Instagram. If you're on our email list, the link is there. You can vote more than once. So if you have a particular favorite, go ahead and vote for that. Thanks to everyone again. I'll see you in Mom Squad.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Well, we've kind of mentioned this, but one of the very special parenting challenges of the 21st century is this pandemic, for sure. But you could look at it kind of like a reboot. The pandemic has stopped some of the noise and brought some things to our attention. So, Dr. Muradian, before we wrap up, I know there are some very real frustrations for people around this pandemic, but to end on a positive note, how would you encourage people to look at it? Oh, and we've lost you. There you are.
Oh, as I was thinking about this question, it kind of reminds me of how we look also at people. If I'm talking to someone that I just met or even a friend, and if they say something that maybe bothers me a little bit or, hits the wrong tone, etc., instead of looking at it, oh, they meant this or they meant that, or look at it from a positive stance. Think about everything that person has to say comes with a positive intent. And I think that will also change your perspective on how you feel about others and how we approach others. And we can also teach our kids the same thing. Well, she didn't mean that. Look at it from a positive point of view. Now, when we go into this, it's the same thing. It's looking at all the positive things that have come out, even if it's a couple or three. And the top things I'm thinking about is how much time we are spending together right now. And again, just focusing on the positive part, which is, wow, we weren't able to do this before, but now we are able to do this, for example. So it could be, we weren't able to have dinner every night. Now we are. We weren't able to go for a walk before. Now we are. We weren't able to just pick up and leave on a Tuesday to Wednesday and just go to the beach. Now we can. So I think it's just about stepping back and looking at the bonding that can occur, and the things that you can do. And again, I go back to my list making and writing down a list of all the things that you still want to do. And that could be, board games. It could be, what are the fun things that we can do together that we weren't able to do before? And I think it's just stepping back and having a reflection, and even sitting down as a family and saying, wow, I just was thinking about this. Where were we at this time last year and today? And what were we not able to do? Do you remember how I was just running around and driving you everywhere or taking you to all these activities, or where we didn't have that time to us, or just, just to open the door and go for a walk, because you were so busy doing other things. So I think that that's really important. It's so easy to focus on the negative in any situation. But when you try to look in the good in people, when you try to look in the good in things, suddenly everything just seems to open up for you in terms of your mood and how you feel. And also, it is a week of being grateful and thinking about this week, just as you're sitting around Thanksgiving table. And this is something we do a lot, is what are you grateful for? And that's such a big word. I think it means so much now more than ever, is what are we grateful for right now in this moment?
Well, thank you, Dr. Muradian, for sharing your expertise and insight. I always love having you on the show. You have so much practical information, and you're living it as a parent also. So
Thank you.
I think that adds a lot. I also want to say congratulations on publishing your new book during the pandemic. The book kind of goes with some of what you were talking about with balancing the negatives with the positives. It's called Frankie and the Worry Bees, and it is a delightful book to give parents and kids of any age a way to talk about and handle stress. And it was written in the pandemic, so it's very, very relevant. Dr. Muradian practices in Glendale and Beverly Hills, California, and surrounding areas. Be sure and check out her website and look for her new book, Frankie and the Worry Bees, on Amazon. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Next Tuesday, we'll be talking to cognitive consultant Alexandra Dunnison about what to do when your child is struggling, how to get to the root of the problem, where to go to find the right kind of help wherever you are in the world, and why we can so confidently say that most learning difficulties can be permanently resolved. Alexandra is a great resource for parents searching for answers for their children, and she has connections all over the world, so be sure and join us next Tuesday at 10. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings. We're also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. This school year is a really tough one for all students. If you have a child who has struggled with learning or attention, this is the year to close that gap. If you would like a free consultation to find out how we can help your child develop the underlying skills they need to be a more confident, independent learner, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Thank you again, Dr. Muradian, and thank you to all of you who have been sharing and subscribing and joining us each week. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you next week.